Thank you so much for coming along this afternoon. It feels quite an honour, actually, to end the sessions today. So we will try and go out with a bang. I'm Susannah Quinsee. I'm Vice President Digital and Student Experience at City University of London. I'm thrilled to be moderating this session this afternoon on the future of learning, which is something dear to my heart in terms of my role. And I'm really keen to hear from our panellists this afternoon about what they think we can do to help prepare students and employers for the brave new world of digital disruption. So on that note, I'm joined by Rob McCargow, Neil Maiden and Jenny Taylor, and I will ask them all to introduce themselves, starting with Rob.
Thanks, Susannah. Good afternoon, everybody, and real pleasure to be back at CogX. It's actually my 7th CogX in a row, so super excited to be back here. And so actually, my job I'm representing today is Senior Visiting Fellow at Bayes Business School, and I've got a sideline of working at PwC. Really, my sort of overriding theme for this is that if I think back to the conversations around this topic when I started speaking at CogX 7 years ago, it felt like a sideline issue. It felt like a niche conversation about the impact of technology on skills, on jobs and education. But I think what we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months is this extraordinary paradigm shift in the urgency around this. So I think the thing I'm talking about today really is the speed at which this transition's happening, Susannah.
Fantastic, thank you. Neil.
Hello, I'm Neil Maiden. I'm Professor of Digital Creativity at the Bayes Business School, where I'm also Director of the Centre for Creativity Enabled by AI, where we're developing and rolling out new digital products to enhance and augment human creative thinking in different areas of work. And I suppose my real interest here is in understanding that I think quite quickly the kinds of tools that we're developing to use AI to enhance creative thinking, reflective learning and so on, will become omnipresent in our work environments, both in education and in professional work for graduates. So the question then becomes, what are the new sets of knowledge, frameworks and skills that people need in engineering, science, business, the arts and so on, in order to exploit these technologies, because the old existing ways, frameworks, theories don't always apply. So we need to move quickly. I'm very much in line with what Rob said there. And can I just say, there are tote bags from our business school there, and some of them have these think outside the box, because I'm a kind of creativity guy. You have to sort of use the barcode to explore and find out what's in them.
Thank you. Oh, this one. Okay. Ooh, cute. Yeah, glad you mentioned the tote bags. I forgot, so thank you for doing that. Thank you, Neil. Last but not least, Jenny.
Hello, I'm Jenny Taylor, and I'm IBM's Early Professionals Leader, and I have been for the last 20 years. So I've seen an awful lot of changes, as you can imagine, and part of that has been a movement from just graduates into apprentices. We also have interns in IBM. And I'm also chair of a trailblazer group for the very first degree apprenticeship, which was the digital degree apprenticeship, which has been hugely successful. So expect me to talk about that as well.
Fantastic. So we've got quite a lot to cover in the 26 or so minutes that we have left, but we will try and get us onto as much of this topic as we can. It's something that we could probably spend the entire afternoon talking about. But first of all, I want to pick up on this pace and scale of change. Universities particularly aren't necessarily known for responding rapidly in terms of our innovation with programs. And it would be really good to know, particularly starting with you, Rob, about how you plan for the future in terms of the workforce that you need and what your window is there in terms of your planning.
Yeah, Susannah, I mean, I think that the problem now is that the ability to sort of forecast reliably is incredibly hard now. So how far into the future can you look beyond the next year or two? So being too deterministic and being too specific around the sorts of skills you're training people to do is a moving target. So I think this is the first thing to take into account. So some of the things we're thinking about, and already have started doing, is not just thinking about targeted upskilling, but looking to upskill the entirety of our 330,000 people globally. No regrets moves. I think the other thing, of course, is the way we are thinking about taking people in, many routes now into the workforce, such as degree apprenticeships, as Jenny said. Removing the 2-1 criteria is something we've already done as a firm. And And then I think there's also something about what we're looking for, not just around technical skills, but in particular behavioral skills as well. And that learning agility, that ability to understand the need for constant reinvention, and that comfort factor with the fact of the matter this will be their career now, that career paths have changed irrevocably in the future, I think is the main overriding thing we're doing. Amongst that, we've also, as an organisation that in the past hasn't been, I guess, at the vanguard of digital pioneering, has been a sort of sea change in thinking about building digital accelerators that catalyse digital growth across the organisation, reverse mentoring to make sure our non-digital natives are also upskilled effectively. So I don't think there's one size fits all here, but I think it's more of a cultural shift around learning agility and bringing the people in from different backgrounds that are comfortable with that constant degree of change.
Thank you. And Jenny, you said you've been here in this business for 20 years at least. So what's your planning window now? Did you ever think we'd...
Well, yes, our planning window is very short. So we know how many early professionals we're going to bring in and what we're going to train them in, of course, changes. And I would say the pace has really quickened. So what we're going to train them in changes almost by the minute. But we are fortunate in IBM because we are a leading edge technology company. We have those materials and that learning at our disposal right from the beginning. So my team doesn't have to write the learning. IBM has already done it. So in that sense, I'm really lucky. And certainly AI is the hot topic at the moment. But we must remember that, we don't even know for the next 5 years what's going to be invented. So AI could be really old hat, and probably will be. In 5 years' time, we'll be talking about something else. So it is important, as Rob said, to employ early professionals who can be adaptable, flexible, and we call it restlessly reinvent. That's one of our watchwords in IBM because we are having to do that on a daily basis. And everyone needs to be able to do that. I am not of an early professional age, but I certainly need to restlessly reinvent continually. So it's not just for young people, it's for people of all ages.
I love that, restlessly reinvent. That's a great phrase. I'll be taking that one away. Neil, what do you think? You were saying that you don't think that we respond quick enough sometimes. So what sort of planning window should we be thinking about?
Yeah, it's difficult because we're a higher education institution and the planning times are sometimes quite long to get new courses lined up. But I think there are things that we can do. I mean, the main thing that we're dealing with in higher education is the emergence of generative AI. This has been a major disruptor for the sector. We see students doing obvious things with it without our provocation, such as summarizing papers that they need to read without perhaps the need to read them. But they're also doing quite innovative things. Some students have been designing research methods for studies using generative AI, and that's something that I hadn't even thought of doing. So I think this has two consequences. First of all, we have to recognize that tools like ChatGPT and the other large language models are out there. And the challenge now for us is to upskill the students so they can use them. That's the first thing. We have to sort of say, you can use them, here are the skills, here are the limits when you say you've used them. But we have to also go beyond that because there are lots of tools that are now leveraging the APIs to GPT and other. There's some out there, I'm sure there are, you can see in the exhibition space, there are tools offering generation of business strategies and so on, which are emerging. And we need to give students as quick and immediate access to those kind of products as we can. The flip side is as well, we have to try and make our assessments as AI-proof as possible. And I think anything outside of closed exams means that regurgitation, declarative knowledge demonstration is really off limits. Personally, I see GPT as an advantage here. I think it enables students sometimes to do things better, more productively, at scale. So I think it means we can change the way in which we assess to much larger, more immersive projects, for example, with PwC and IBM, where students can engage in design activities, business activities, and leverage the AI in order to be able to do things that they couldn't normally do within a 3-week period.
Great, thank you. So given that pace and scale of change, and particularly what you were just saying there about working with employers. It feels like a kind of partnership approach between employers and educators is the way forward. Jenny, how do you think we can work constructively together?
Well, 2 words, degree apprenticeships, of course. And that has been a real game changer, I think, because with degree apprenticeships, the universities absolutely have to work with the employer, and because it's a 3-way process, and it's quite an intensive 3-way process. We don't just ship off our degree apprentices to university, 1 day a week or whatever it is, and say off you go. We actually have tripartite meetings with the tutors. The students have to do projects based on their work in the office, and it's that on-the-job training that is the key point that then blends with the academic training. But it also means that the academic staff have to understand what we do. And I was having a round table with some of my apprentices this morning, and they were telling me that their university tutors didn't actually understand what they were doing. And I said, well, yes, how can they? How should they? Because that isn't in their area of expertise at the moment, isn't in their experience. So it gives a fantastic 3-way process between the apprentice, the employer, and the academic involved to really push forward the bounds of learning, and it's all relevant to the workplace and employability, and that's the key.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rob, what's your take on this partnership between employers and...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, as Jenny was saying, it's a sort of 3-way partnership, isn't it, between the worker, the employer, and the education sector as well. And I just wanted to underline this with a couple of findings from a study we do every year. Our Hopes and Fears survey looks at about 54,000 workers globally. And I think the first thing to say is that the World Economic Forum survey suggests that 44% of employees say that the skills required for their workers will be massively disrupted within 5 years. But a somewhat smaller figure of the employees we survey believe that's the case. So we've got a disconnect between what the workforce requirements are already, and then if you've got this double lag of the employer, of the education sector not keeping up, it's an issue. I mean, for example, maybe 7 years ago when I came in to give lectures at Bays, material might be good enough for 2 or 3 years shelf life. I gave a lecture last week and it's already out of date. It's moving at that pace. So I think just first things first, there's an issue between workforce, employer, employee to start with. I think there's also this thing about workforce sentiment as well. And there is differing studies that suggest that actually there's reasonably broad positive sentiment by workers, depending on the sector they're working in around AI. I think all of this is critical around thinking about the communication that we share as employers, first things first, how it's articulated by the education sector is absolutely critical to get right. And I think the other thing is as well, and this is great where the tech degree apprentices come into the equation, is I think there's also a degree of distrust around some of these AI tools that are being deployed. And when they fail, it's due to lack of trust where the technology is leveled at workers. So the critical thing that big employers are doing is trying to collaborate with the workforce to shape and secure these technologies to do it well. And this is where this new breed of apprentices coming into the workforce is really powerful as well. So I think it's about having a bold, positive vision of tech adoption as an employer, then working in partnership with the education sector. And just to elaborate upon that, we've got a 1,000-person tech hub in Manchester we're building. We didn't want to turn up and say we want to hire 1,000 technologists and decimate the talent landscape. So there we are working collaboratively across all major organisations, the universities in the area, and all civil society groups to make sure it's kind of lifting the talent across a whole region rather than just acting as one employer in a sector.
So it is then a very partnership approach, not just between the employers and the educators, but also the whole community in that respect. Neil, what do you think we can do from an educator's perspective in terms of partnership working?
Well, one thing I want to say, just in response to what Rob said, I mean, one of our challenges, because we're researching and developing these kind of AI tools to augment creative thinking, is that, and we try to roll these tools out in production lines, making tractors, we rolled them out in newsrooms, we've rolled them out in sports clubs, and we always find you need champions. champions who are willing to understand a bit of the technology and explain to their peers what the effect of it is. So I think that's an interesting role for apprentices who have sufficient knowledge of the technology to go in. I think more generally, I mean, to me, being slightly more academic, I see it as there's business problems, and we in academia often have at least knowledge of the potential solutions, certainly the technology ones which are coming. I mean, we've been developing these kind of creativity tools now for about 15 years, which is 14 and a half years longer than GPT-3's been around. So, you know, we've had foresight here. And the one thing I'd say is that, yes, the solutions are available to solve the industry problems, but also the solutions that we have create new opportunities, which you can see as problems. So this idea of business problems and technology academic solutions are quite tightly intertwined. And so we really need to work together to explore how these emerging technologies can shape work earlier than we certainly did with the generative AI explosion that hit us last December, which I think caught a lot of academia and computer scientists cold as well. I mean, I was thinking about my teaching. I've been teaching in academia for 30 years, and I don't think there's anything that I've taught that has not been shaped by my interactions with industry. Everything from defense through to finance, through to people in the arts sector. So, yes, we need to have this kind of way of working. We have some government policies driven by Innovate UK, but I think there's more scope. We have to find better ways of working with each other. I haven't got all the answers. If there's anyone from government here...
There we are, call out there. I mean, and actually picking up on that point, I mean, the scale and pace of change is very exciting, and but for our young people, it may feel quite overwhelming at times. I mean, they're used to using technology in their everyday lives. They don't necessarily see how they can apply it in areas like education, and perhaps going into the workforce, they don't always know necessarily the whole range of options available to them. So what skills do we need to give to our young people? Neil, what do you think we would do with our students?
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm a professor of digital creativity, so what gets me out of bed in the morning is the desire and I think the need to enhance the creative thinking skills of our workforce. Creative thinking is associated with greater innovation, greater productivity. I think it's a sort of core problem that we don't address in the productivity debate. So I think if we're going to exploit the emerging technologies, AI and otherwise, that are appearing in the marketplace, we need to give our graduates and therefore our employees a new set of frameworks, models, techniques and skills with which to be more effective as creative thinkers, and as a consequence also more effective as learners. Because when you're engaged in creative thinking and it's some kind of problem solving, you're having to learn in new ways about the problem. You're also having to learn in new ways about the possible solutions with which to solve that. And then when the solution is implemented, you have to reflect on how well it's working. So creative thinking is a key enabler, I think, to the productivity crisis in the UK that we don't talk about enough, but I'm hoping AI is beginning to change that. And it also becomes a key learning tool that I think can be employed in apprenticeships in businesses as well as in academia. And I going back to my point earlier, I mean, our students are constantly engaged in quite large-scale design projects in order to solve problems in London. That's how they learn. It's learning through immersion, through problem solving, and through reflection afterwards. And we need to give them new frameworks and theories that work in that context. And I don't want to sound too abstract and academic about this, but it's a new skill set that needs to be brought in.
Absolutely, and it's getting students, isn't it, to be able to articulate where they're applying those problem solving and creativity skills, because often they're doing it in their everyday lives, but they may not have thought about it in that way. Rob, what's your take on how can we upskill, and what should we be telling our young people coming into education, higher education?
I mean, I think we're long past the point of trying to engineer a career path by guessing your way through the subjects that will get you where you need to be in 5-10 years' time. Some of it comes down, I think, to a bit of guesswork around which skills are likely to still be highlighted and preserved in years to come, and therefore which jobs are more likely to be disrupted. I mean, there's a couple of throwaway comments about the jobs that I get asked about quite a lot. I've been told that barbering is safe. No one wants a robot near their beard, so any bearded people in the room today, I think, stick with the artisanal craft of your barber. But on a truthful story, there's a terrific story about how AI really struggles with British sarcasm. So if you're sarcastic and your kids are sarcastic, I think they'll be future-proofed as well. So yeah, that's another skill. But on a serious note, I mean, there's real jobs now entering a workplace. In my team alone, we've got people specializing in AI ethics. Not just, is this technology safe, reliable, legally compliant, regulatory sound, but is it something we should be doing? Is it fair? Is it transparent? Is it robust? So there's a whole host of skill sets around that. We also, I'm sure many in the room, people are already, you are amateur or even professional prompt engineers. And this is very much a real skill that's required to get the most out of these large language models. I'm sure Neil will speak to that as well. And by the way, I've already started early, so I had quite a funny story. A couple of months ago, I got invited on BBC Radio 5 Live Breakfast to talk about this. And at the end of the interview, they said, Rob, are you using ChatGPT in your life at all? And I said, well, actually, I'm using this with my 7-year-old daughter to write bedtime stories. And they asked me if I wouldn't mind reading out a ChatGPT bedtime story on live National Radio 5, which was a slightly surreal experience, I must admit. But in truth, you know, this is absolutely giving early experience to the new workforce around how these technologies are going to be used, how we can use them for our benefit, and how it augments what we've already got. Yeah. So for me, I think it's hard to forecast precisely with like that laser precision about what those jobs are going to be. But we all have tried things like ChatGPT, haven't we? It's great, but it's not good enough. And that delta between perfection and necessity for complicated, you know, critical path jobs, things that are regulatory, robust, you know, there's a whole host of skills that are very much human skills that we need to focus on now. It's not all about becoming a PhD data scientist. It opens up this extraordinary array for very much those human skills in the future.
Yes, brilliant. I think there's a lot of teenagers, certainly my eldest daughter, that would love the fact that sarcasm is going to be a great skill set for the future.
No, don't encourage it.
I just say there is computational creativity work going on in the world of AI, which is about understanding what the essence of a joke is, including sarcastic jokes, and trying to then generate machines that can be genuinely sarcastic. It's just not in large language models. It is coming.
Brilliant. Jenny, your take.
Yes, I think it's really interesting. IBM has just recently issued a report on AI, and it actually found that STEM skills, which are the things that we normally say, oh, we must have STEM students, will actually decrease in importance. And those good old transferable skills, or fusion skills, as I recently heard them called, such as problem solving and creativity and communication skills and teamworking, are still incredibly important, and the things that actually we still look for when we recruit our early professionals. Yes. Those are the things that we look for in the selection centres. We're not looking at can they do AI or anything? Because actually, curiously, I think IBM have just proved that anybody can do AI if you put your mind to it, because we've just had a worldwide jam where every IBMer, so there's several 100,000 IBMers across the globe, were invited to use our Watson X, that's our AI machine, our Watson X infrastructure, to do our own AI projects. So we all had a go, and guess what? Yes, you can do it. And I found it fascinating because it is problem solving. So if you put this in, what do you get out? If you put that in, what do you get out? And it's all about, as we said, the quality of the data. But it is problem solving, and it's creativity. It's not having to have deep techie coding skills. Obviously, behind the scenes that's still required. But I still think, and this is probably going against the grain of current thinking, that those really good transferable personal skills and that problem solving is still the key to future success.
Great. So really doubling down on some of the things that are core, but perhaps have been lost recently in the drive for perhaps more technical skills. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you like what your key message you would like people to take away from this panel, and actually given that we're at the end of the conference as well. So what would be your key bit of advice to people listening here that have thinking about the future of learning? What would your key message be? Rob, shall I start with you as you're in my line of vision?
Yeah, I mean, one question I'm always asked about is, am I an optimist or pessimist about this stuff? And I don't think it is so binary. I'm a sort of describe myself as a responsible optimist. I'm really excited about how this will lift work, and it will remove the drudgery and the risk and the repetition, the opportunity to, turbocharge many of the things we can do, to augment us cognitively, to really think about like achieving things way beyond our sort of current capability. Thinking about the way it's impacting industries, into healthcare, being applied to rare diseases, for example. Everywhere you look, there's been inspiration around the last 3 days, hasn't there, about the ability of this technology in our hands at this democratized price point to solve some of the most intractable problems facing business and society. So all of this now is within reach now and in the next few years, but there's a huge but there, yeah? And this is all about doing it well, collaborating across industry sectors, functional, into the political space, getting the policy right. There's a lot to get right, and at the heart of this is empowering this new workforce with the skills to do it. So I'm on this sort of borderline, really excited about this, but not avoiding the elephant in the room. That we have to embed this right from the get-go. That technology won't just happen positively by default. It will require a lot of work. So
Great.
Exciting years ahead.
Exciting, and we can't ignore it. We've got to actively embrace it or try and shut it away, as I think sometimes is particularly some of the debates we've seen in universities, particularly where people are kind of, oh no, we'll just go back to a very traditional style of learning or assessment. It's going to help. Neil, what would be your key message?
I'm going to cheat and have 2 quick ones.
Oh, go on.
I think if you're on the technical side, let me just say, AI is not just generative AI, and it's not just machine learning. I think what the emergence of certainly GPT-3 showed within the computer science community, in order to build effective, reliable solutions, we need to combine symbolic AI and non-symbolic, right? So it's about combining generative AI with machine learning, but also going back to expert systems and case-based reasoning systems, which many of the younger people in the audience are kind of going, what are they? That was old AI, good old AI, it's known. And I think the consensus view is that's where we're really going to leverage this, have all the old different kinds of technologies working together under the bonnet. The other thing I say is it's quite easy to pick up sort of meta-knowledge, how to be creative. Go to Thinker Toys by Michael McCargow or any of these kind of books, and you can pick up a lot of very basic creative thinking skills without needing to come on our slightly more expensive master's course or the MBA at Bayes. Skills are readily available, and you can start to be more creative, more effective regularly every day just by reading some of these books.
Fantastic, thank you. And Jenny, you get the last word.
I do, and as an employer, of course, I'm going to say it's employability skills, and that is what the UK needs. And I believe that education, that academia, that schools need to slant themselves a lot more strongly towards training students to have employability skills, focus on that. Apprenticeships are one way of doing that, right from level 2 right up to level 7. They're a brilliant way because it's all about on-the-job relevant training. But we've got to shift the balance and not have a stigma around the word apprenticeship and it's people in hard hats or something like that, because it's not. Apprenticeships can now be had, in medicine, in law, in accountancy. So all those things, all those skills are required by the UK, and the sooner we shift the balance right from reception year upwards, then that's when we'll be on the right track.
So there does seem like, as you'd perhaps expect for a panel of Future of Learning, there's a big education piece, isn't there, here, particularly for kids and parents and people and employers to support that change in terms of the skill sets and the types of opportunities that are available. Well, we are nearly at the end of our time. I'd just like to thank Rob, Neil and Jenny for a really uplifting, thought-provoking and very inspiring discussion this afternoon. It's certainly given me a lot to think about and lots of enthusiasm, actually, for the future of learning. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.